Oh, hi, this is Sarah Czar, and you are listening to This Creative Life. I'm going back through the archives this summer to repost episodes with some updated introductions and to shave off legacy information about the podcast that is no longer valid. For instance, there are no more Patreon or Substack subscriptions, but if you'd like to support the podcast with a one-time donation, as often as you'd like, go to sarahzar.com/podcast and check out the options there. I'm starting off with the first episode of the 2020 reboot, in which I talked to author Brandy Colbert. We recorded this episode on March 20th, 2020. And since then, Brandy's book, The Voting Booth, was published, and her nonfiction work about the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, Blackbirds in the Sky, is available for pre-order. It comes out in October. Check out brandycolbert.com for more. Here we are in March 2020, a bit of a time capsule. Enjoy. My guest today is author Brandy Colbert. She is the award-winning author of several books for children and teens. She's co-writer of Misty Copeland's Life in Motion Young Readers Edition, and her short fiction and essays have been published in a variety of critically acclaimed anthologies for young people. And she's won a bunch of awards and gotten a bunch of accolades, and she is on faculty at the is it Hamlin or Hamline?
It's Hamlin. You had the right instinct.
That's what I thought. Okay. Welcome, Brandy, to This Creative Life.
Thank you, Sarah Zara. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're happy, and I'm excited to talk to you. Given how fast everything is changing right now, I'm just going to say we are recording this on Friday, March 20th. And I just want to know, how are you doing?
So, I've been telling people that this isn't too much of a difference from my daily life, to be honest. I feel like I'm either on the road or I'm in my house. But I kind of had a little breakdown last night where I was like, I haven't left my house since last Tuesday. And usually that would be too long. But I think it's kind of started, the pandemic is kind of starting to get to me a little bit. It's not so much the not leaving the house, because I like a really comfortable house. I have a good setup here. But I think it's just all the uncertainty around what's going on in my city, and actually the whole state of California is now under sort of a lockdown. So I'm okay. I'm alive. I'll say that. I'm alive, and I am healthy for now, and I'm doing a lot better than a lot of other people. So I'm grateful for that.
Me too. I'm about in the same place where when everything started kind of ramping up, I was like, okay, we can do this. Like, let's get that problem solving energy going. And now it's like day 4 of really the kind of like everyone stay home. Now I'm in Utah. What we have going on right now is not as strict as what's in place in California, but it's the same concept. It's basically like, don't really go anywhere if you don't have to. No gatherings over 10 people. Bars and restaurants are closed except for takeout, all that kind of stuff. And I was doing okay. And then Wednesday we had an earthquake.
I didn't even know about that.
Yes. I grew up in San Francisco. So if there's one like disaster I'm prepared for, it's earthquakes. Because in the 70s, there were a number of them. And then I was there for the big one in 89. Mm. But I've lived in Utah for 20 years and there hasn't been a one, even though we are on a fault line and everyone's like, oh yeah, we're on a fault line. But yes, it was a 5.7, wow. Which, it was legit. And the epicenter was only like 10 to 15 miles away from the part of Salt Lake where I live.
Oh, good.
Which, yeah. And what made it so different from any California quakes I've been in were the aftershocks, because the epicenter was so close and it was a shallow quake, meaning, it wasn't that far below the earth. Mm-hmm. We just felt there were like 8 hours of aftershocks, and a couple of the aftershocks were like in the 3s and 4s on the Richter scale. And it was just like, I don't like this. And that in combination with all the measures to, flatten the curve of the virus. It was just not, it was not great. And my husband is in another state, and we're like trying to figure out how to reunite before there's anything more nutty that happens, like no one can cross state borders or anything. So
Right.
it's been, yeah, I'm with you. I'm having like every couple of days I have like a little breakdown, and then I am okay again, but it's so uncertain. It's the uncertainty that's tough.
It is, which is funny because, thinking about natural disasters, I am from the Midwest. And so we grew up with tornado drills.
Yeah.
And that was kind of something that you could not necessarily prepare for, but you knew when one was on the way. And so living out in California, I've lived in California for a long time now, like almost 20 years. And, it was sort of the uncertainty of the earthquakes that has always been kind of bothered me. But now I'm like, well, I mean, that's just life. That's daily life now. So it kind of feels, like it makes sense that you would have an earthquake now, but also that's really wild and in Utah.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly was not expecting that. It's a weird thing, I think, as humans we have where we expect nature to kind of play by some arbitrary rules we have in our head. Like, well, we have a virus right now, so we're not going to have like earthquakes and tornadoes. And it's
Exactly.
like, no, that's not actually how that works. And, you just go, gosh. But like you said, I feel very lucky. I'm not being directly economically impacted yet. I'm sure that will come, but and I have a secure home, and I've got food, and I'm very, very grateful for all the resources I do have.
Right. Same.
Okay. Back to writing. Your debut novel, was your debut Point?
It was, yes.
And what year did that come out?
That came out in 2014, so 6 years ago.
What was the, I guess, on-ramping for you, of getting your debut novel represented and acquired and that whole process? Was it kind of did you have like a short kind of a journey, or like a long, arduous slog, or kind of something in between?
Oh, no. Yeah, I had a long, arduous slog. And it's so funny because things are so different now. Like, the Twitter pitch contests and all that stuff. I'm not sure that would have been the route for me anyway, but that did not exist when I started out. So I've been writing since I was a little kid. And I started and then I got a journalism degree because I didn't know you could actually study creative writing in school. And I don't think my parents would have paid for that kind of degree for me. And I like journalism, so it worked out. But I decided when I was about 25 that I was actually going to start writing for publication. And I'd never really I'd taken like 2 writing classes before, but I'd been writing my whole life. So it kind of felt like my own education. And so I wrote a book, and it was an adult book at first. And then I was like, this is really boring. Like, I don't want to read this. And so I changed the characters to teenagers. And I'm really not sure, I know there must have been some, kind of modern YA book that got me into reading young adult literature again, but I cannot remember what it was. But I decided to make those characters teenagers, and then started querying. And that was it was kind of in between the old school way of having to mail everything through the postal service, or being able to do some of it online. So some agents were still asking for you to send query letters and manuscripts through the mail. And then some were you can email. So it was a little bit of a mix of that. And I think I had the writer's market, that 20,000 page book that had a listing of every literary agent in the United States. So yeah, I did that, and I queried probably over 100 agents. I had a whole list, and it was super embarrassing. Now I look back and I'm just you just weren't ready. Why didn't you know? But I didn't know any other writers. So, and there were some resources. So I was sort of online, checking out some bulletin boards, message boards. But basically, long story short, I wrote 3 more books after that one, and the third one, I could tell that agents were starting to get a little more interested, but maybe still not there yet with the story. I heard it was a little too quiet, which I still love. And then my 4th book I wrote was Point, and I got I had been talking to an agent who read my third novel that, never sold. And she asked if I was working on anything else. And I said, I've got this other little thing I was working on. And I showed it to her, the pages that I had, and she was excited about it and said, okay, we'll finish it. And I think, we have the same vision, and then we'll talk more after you finish it, and I'll read it, and, we'll talk. And I showed it to her. We did not have the same vision. It did not work out. I was devastated. I was like, I'm going to quit writing.
Yeah.
I took a sick day from work. I was so upset. And I was like, I'm just going to quit. And then I was like, well, you don't have to quit. Just go out with a bang and query, because I hadn't queried anybody else besides her with that. So I was like, just go out with a bang, query your top agents, including some who had rejected you and you were embarrassed to ever, show up in their inbox again. And that's what I did. And then I took a nap and I woke up and I had a full request from Tina Dubois at ICM. And that's kind of that story. I did a revise and resubmit for her. And she's been my agent now for 9 years.
Your story is so much like mine that I was about 25 when I decided I'm going to try and write for publication. I wrote a first book that was not ready for anything, and I sent it around. And I wrote 2 more. And so Story of a Girl was my 4th book and my first published book. And it was all, at the beginning I was doing things through the mail, and by the end of the search it was all email. And I got a lot of, from that first book I was sending around, a lot of the it's a little quiet type of feedback. The whole shebang for me, it was 8 to 10 years of that. Was that about you?
Okay, so you had double my time. We have a similar story, but I was about 4 years, because I think I started querying in 2006.
Okay.
2005, 2006, and then I signed with Tina in 2011.
Okay. Oh man. And yeah, I definitely near the end of that, I was just I think I should stop because I can't take it anymore. Not because I didn't want to write or I didn't think I could. I just didn't know what more to do. And so I think that's part of the time that it took. Was I would take long breaks and just be I can't think about this for 6 months. And just be working and living my life. But then once I sort of found the right agent and the right book, and my writing got better and all of that, then it started to come together. But it's arduous. I always want to find that balance when I'm talking to writers who are still working on selling their first book. Mm-hmm. I want to find the balance between encouragement and realism. Just be
right.
It's hard and it can take a long time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It taking a long time or it feeling really hard or bad aren't signs that you can't do it. I mean, you don't have to do it, but I don't know. But then to say took me 9 years or whatever can sound, if someone told me ahead of time it was going to take me 9 years, I'd say, I'm not doing that.
Right.
Because every year I felt it's probably going to be this year. This is the year.
Yes.
And I just kept doing that a year at a time.
But I like the honesty, because I feel especially now that everything's so immediate and so online and just not the way it was when you and I were starting out, that you hear a success story I think of Angie Thomas's story, which is incredible, and, obviously really worked out, and it's a great book, and she has an awesome career. But I think a lot of people who maybe came up after her and see this really unique success story, yeah, I just kind of threw out this, pitch on Twitter, and then it all worked out. And I mean, one of the most successful best-selling authors in young adult fiction. I feel maybe a lot of people think that can happen when that's not actually how it happens most of the time.
Yeah, it's not the norm.
Right.
But a weird thing can happen when you're an author or an aspiring author, and you, of course, and you should start following a ton of authors on Twitter or Instagram or whatever your social media app of choice is. And you start getting a perception that everybody is constantly getting book deals and movie options and signing with agents and New York Times bestsellers. And it's just because you happen to be following like the 100 most successful people in the field that you want to be in, because obviously you are, because that's what you want to watch and figure out what you can learn from. And those are the people you're fans of. But it can give you a really distorted sense of what reality is.
Right. I agree. And I love those success stories because I think it's really amazing to just see how far they can go and how different it is from my experience. But yeah, I think you're right in that you say, be honest about, it took me 8 to 10 years to do this, or, for me, 5 to 6 or whatever it was. And that may be your experience too. And if you really want it, you're going to write it out.
Yeah. And also, like you, I had never really taken any formal type of writing classes. And like you, then I wound up teaching for an MFA program, and you're doing that too. And I wonder, do you, how do I phrase this? I always felt big attacks of imposture. I do have bad posture, but imposter syndrome when I would like be getting ready for a residency for teaching, or like getting ready to teach a workshop, even though in my mind I knew like I'm getting positive feedback. I know that I know what I'm talking about, but just because I didn't have that academic background, I would often like have a little voice in the back of my head just being like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. How is teaching for you? Do you feel confident in that, or is that something that has just grown over time?
Oh yeah, I know that voice. And like, how did you get in my head? You have that voice too. Yeah, I spent about so I started at Hamlin in summer 2018, and it's a low res, so we work remotely throughout the semesters, and then we meet up twice a year for residency in January and July. And the first, I would say, this past January 2020 is like the first time I actually felt comfortable being there as a member of faculty. And that's not to say it's because of anyone else. It's like it's that little voice in my head. Everyone there is really excited, and I look out at during a lecture and I'm just like, wow, these people are actually listening to me, and they look like they don't hate me, and they're not like booing me off, the podium. But it was really hard for me at first. I never imagined myself teaching. And I think because like you, I don't have that creative writing, background of like formal learning in that. It's all self-taught from just reading and writing from a young age. And yeah, so I have that quite a bit. It's getting a little bit better, but I still get really nervous. And like, I just always assume people think like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Why is she up there?
Well, and the secret truth is, even when you're in an MFA program, it's still learn by doing. You're just getting guidance from people in a more compressed time frame and in a more formal way. But all writing is really learn by doing, learn by reading, learn by practicing, learn by taking in all the information that you can. But when you haven't gone through an academic process, that can sort of haunt you a little bit. And you want to feel legitimized by that degree.
Yeah, I think it's like also hard for some people who are like creative minded, but they need specific answers. I've worked with people before where they sort of wanted to be like, but tell me how to fix this. But this is right? Like, tell me how to fix this. And I'm like, I can ask you questions so you can get around to learning how to fix it, but I can't tell you exactly how to do this thing. It's like esoteric, and there are rules, but I find that the rules don't always apply. So
on a different topic, I know that your latest release, The Only Black Girls in Town, which literally just came out like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was March 10th. So
okay. Yeah, different world.
I know. It feels like 200 years ago.
Was that your first middle grade?
It is. Yeah, it's my middle grade debut. So I've written 4 YA books, and this is my first book for younger readers.
Now, I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this, but I can't imagine it would be a secret. But the next thing I'm doing is middle grade, and I've been working on that. And I'm curious to hear what you've experienced, the differeces.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm so happy to hear that you're writing a middle grade, because I was thinking before this interview, I was like, I know Sarah has, a ton of YA books out, but I was like, I don't think she's done middle grade, and I wonder if she will. So this makes me very happy. Yeah, I still don't know how this book was written. And I actually am working on another middle grade that's sold but not announced, so I can't say anything about it yet. I haven't been able to sort of drill down the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, I guess there's a big difference in that my YA is, I don't like the word edgy, but I mean, it's got all the hallmarks of edgy YA,
Sex.
sex, drinking, drugs, rock and roll. Uh, and I don't really even think of it that way. I just write the story as it comes to me. I don't really think about censoring it until someone's like, maybe take out those F bombs, like, the 25
Mm-hmm.
F bombs in these two chapters.
Get it down to 12 and a half.
Exactly. Yeah. I've been asked to watch my cursing. But other than that, I don't know. It feels very natural to me. And I would say in the last few years, I've been reading more middle grade than YA.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel I can get a little burnt out on YA. I love
Mm-hmm.
it so much. I never want to stop writing it. But I just felt like I needed a little bit of a break. And so I started reading middle grade again. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, why did I ever stop reading these books?
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of transported back to how I felt as a kid reading those, because I would just devour books. Like there was,
Same.
yeah. I mean, when there was one Christmas, I literally, as a kid, asked for nothing but books. I didn't want any toys. I didn't want anything else. And my parents delivered. They just had this huge box of paperbacks. It was the best Christmas I've ever had. But yeah, I think it just kind of, reading it, I get transported back to that place. And then writing it, I don't know. No, because the whole time I was writing The Only Black Girls in Town, I was like, is this what a 12-year-old sounds like? Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the first pages I sent to my agent's very editorial, as I think yours is too.
Not so much anymore.
Okay. She's pretty editorial, so nothing gets by her that's like, like, oh.
Oh yeah, no, I mean nothing gets by him. We don't like go through processes, but I send things to him, and if he's like not yet, then I'm like, oh okay.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so she was like, I feel like you're, in the first pages that I sent, she was like, I like this, but I feel like you're really trying to write to like a middle grade, like, shorter chapters and this and that. And like, you're really trying to make this a middle grade, and it's not like you're kind of forcing it in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So she was like, just write it, just write it. And so I did. But I still don't know how I got into that 12-year-old voice. I mean, I very vividly remember being 12.
Yeah.
I remember my summer before 7th grade, all of that.
Mm.
But I know there was a huge fight between me and 3 other girls. There was like
God. I know.
3-way calling, like mess, my mom being like, stop playing on my phone, like all of that stuff. So I remember that, but at the time, of course you feel so much older than you are. So when I was 12, I didn't feel 12. I thought I was as old as you could be. I thought I was the smartest person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I know that's like a really long way to say I don't know.
Uh-huh. Well, it's funny. People would ask me like, do you think you'll ever write middle grade? I'm like, oh no. Like if I get out of YA, if I write something other than YA, it'll be something older, like something adult. Mostly because I feel like the lower you go in age, the harder the writing is in a way. Like, and
yes, I said stylistically.
That so much. And you have a more limited set of words and experiences and all of that to work with. And I tend to, most of what I read is adult, so I thought that would be it. But then when my agent and editor were both like, what do you think about trying middle grade? I was like, well, I'll try. I mean, I was going to like show them like, see, like I can't do it. And they're like, oh no, this is great. Like, this is exactly the kind of thing we would hope for. I'm like, oh, okay. Cause I didn't want to do that, try too hard. And I found myself reading several middle grade novels and then just being like, it's just in there. It's like you said, like your agent said, just write it, just do it. Those experiences are in there. What's really coming out for me as I'm writing this story is remembering just how little agency you have at 11 or 12 versus 15 or 16, and how frustrating that can be. And just, especially if something big is happening in your life that's being caused by adults and you just have it's not like you can go get a job and earn some money. You can't like drive off in your car. You know, my character is not even allowed to have a phone yet. And it's just like, wow, it's just so, I mean, for me, like 11 was like the year my mom got remarried and we had to move, and I did not want that. And that's sort of what the book is about. So,
Okay.
it's like bringing up all those sad feelings again about something happening that I didn't want to happen.
And yeah, 12 was the year that my parents got divorced, and it just like completely rocked my world. I didn't see it coming. And so there's a divorce in The Only Black Girls in Town. It's not the main character's parents, and so I think I've tried to write about divorce before, but like I still can't quite do it from the main character's perspective, which is really funny because I'm like, that was almost 30 years ago, you know, and it's like still just so deep. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's like all those moments where just everything is changing, and there's sort of a mourning or a grief for this past, like this like innocence that you can't get back.
What has your experience been as a Black woman in publishing, which is a very white industry? Just how is that kind of played out for you? And I know you center your stories on Black girls, and
yeah, it's a very conscious choice. I feel like I talk a lot about how I grew up. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, which is the Ozarks. So it's the southwest part of Missouri, about 2 hours from the Arkansas border. And that was a very white town. That was, when I was growing up, it was about 3% Black.
Wow.
Yeah, and almost all white otherwise. I mean, if I saw anyone of a different ethnicity walking around, I would be like, where did you come from? Why are you here? Like, are you okay? You know, it was, I had a really great childhood. My parents provided very well for me and my brother, and are great parents. And I wouldn't trade that, but it was tough. And, I didn't really feel like I saw myself anywhere. And especially even then, if I did see Black people in media or in books or whatever, it wasn't like, it felt like it was a very specific type of Black, like there was only one narrative. And I just didn't necessarily grow up like that. Like I have a very huge extended family from the South. So, I'm very familiar. And I always say, like, I may have been raised in a white town, but my parents raised me super Black, like, to be super proud of who I am and everything. But growing up, I got a lot of the, like, you sound like a white girl, and, you're not Black enough, and all this stuff. And so I think I'm still trying to work out some of that stuff on the page. It's getting better, but I basically, my first book was about a girl who grew up in a similar situation, like a suburb outside of a fake suburb outside of Chicago that's predominantly white. So I was definitely working out some of the stuff there. But I've seen my writing kind of grow. Like at first, I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly, but I felt like I was sort of scared to write Black characters as like supporting characters. Because I hadn't really grown up with any besides, my family or like church members that I would see. We went to a Black church every week. But other than that, I just kind of felt like, what if I'm not writing this authentically? And so if anyone who's read all of my books will see, like, Point starts out with a very white supporting cast. There's usually at least another person of color in the supporting cast, but starts out with it. And now it's like, I keep saying, like, Birdie, The Revolution of Birdie Randolph, my fourth YA book, was like my Blackest book yet, because I think like almost everybody in that book is Black. And I'm just like, oh, it's nice to see that I sort of felt more comfortable with that as I go on, because the older I get, the more I'm meeting people who are like, oh, I grew up like you, or like, oh, you're still Black, just because you grew up that way doesn't mean you aren't. But in the publishing industry, it's been an interesting ride, because I feel like when I first published, that was 2014. And then like the We Need Diverse Books movement kicked off like shortly, like right before or shortly after my first book was published. And so I think people were definitely trying to usher in more diversity. But then as that came along, it felt like the gatekeepers really wanted a specific Black experience. So kind of going back to how I didn't feel Black enough, growing up, it seems like that they would have told me that too. Like, this isn't the experience we want to read about or share with our students, because this isn't what we consider the Black experience. That's been something that I've still struggled with as I keep writing and keep going on, because there is no one Black experience. And
Right.
as I've kept publishing, there's been more and more Black authors who've come into the game, and I'm so excited. And, there's just like everything Black now, like Black contemporary realistic, YA, middle grade,
Hmm.
fantasy. Like it's really amazing to see. And I'm so glad, but I think the one thing that could improve would be not to push one narrative. And I really think that narrative is the Black pain narrative.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's the problem with the whole, last ever, the last forever of not having very much representation, because when you have so little representation, that's the aftermath of that. Is like, we only have room for two kinds of stories,
Exactly.
and it's these two. But if there's room at the table for everybody, then you get that this is about an individual character's story and life and joys and pains and challenges and triumphs, and they don't have that burden of, now I must represent everybody of my people group.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely that pressure, or like, yeah, I've even read, I shouldn't read reviews and I shouldn't talk about the reviews that I read, but I'm going to. And, so I read a reader review for the Only Black Girls in Town. And it was just sort of like, yeah, like we get it. The main character is different. Like, you have two dads, like you're a vegetarian and you surf. And I'm like, I wasn't really trying to make her all that different. She's just Black and she happens to do that kind of thing. I don't surf, but I'm a vegetarian. And, it's just, and that was from a Black person. And from what I could tell from their photo. And so it's upsetting. I probably shouldn't say that because I could be listening, but I don't know. It's upsetting. I just like to talk about that stuff because, when your own community is trying to put you in a box, then
Hmm.
that's a real problem too. If people would listen to the fact that there are all kinds of kids living all different kinds of lives from all different kinds of backgrounds. And like, we do need all these different types of books, and, take a chance on this one.
Hmm.
I don't know. I just wish that the gatekeepers could be a little more open-minded. I think they're getting there. And I've noticed like more authors kind of speaking up about this, just saying, if our stories about Black pain are good enough for you, like, why won't you take our stories about joy too?
Hmm.
So I'm definitely not the only one addressing it. And I just hope that the more we keep talking about it, or the more we keep writing these books, they won't be able to be ignored, and that we'll have just more perspectives out there.
Hmm. What is the premise of The Only Black Girls in Town, other than the title?
Right. I know, which is like, someone came up to me and they were like, I love that title. It just reminds me of like, the 40-year-old virgin. Like, you just know what it's about. I was like, I guess so. Thanks. It's like one of the titles I've come up with myself that's been instantly approved. Yeah, so it is about a 12-year-old girl named Alberta. She's a rising seventh grader, and she lives in the fictional town of Ewing Beach, which is set on the central coast of California.
Mm,
And she lives, I know, I love the central coast.
let's all move there.
I know. That's where I want to retire, we say.
Same. We'll see you there.
Yes, I'll see you in Pismo. And she lives with her two dads, and she is a surfer and a vegetarian. But, she's been the only Black girl in her town, really her own age, like pretty much her whole life. And then one day she sees, right before school starts, she sees there's a sold sign on the bed and breakfast across the street. And she's like, wait a minute. And her dad's like, yeah, guess what? New family moving in, and they're Black. And
Uh,
she's like, I know. So they are so excited. And meanwhile, her other dads, she has two dads. One she calls Dad, and then the other one she calls Elliot by his first name. And, Elliot, the other dad, is like, okay, but, we might not be like them. Like, don't get all excited. And he's giving her lessons, and not all her skin folk or kinfolk. And, but the new girl is quite different from Alberta, but she does happen to be her age, which was just like my dream. I just always wanted, not even just a Black girl, I just wanted a girl my age across the street that I could just play with, you know? And Edie, the new girl, is from Brooklyn, and she is a goth girl. So she wears black lipstick and all black and long black hair. And she's just very New Yorker, which I love. I love New Yorkers. And so they don't really have a lot in common at first. And Alberta's kind of like, uh-oh, maybe I misjudged this. But then they end up starting to sort of get to know each other, and they find these journals in the attic of the bed and breakfast. And they're journals from the 1950s and 60s written by this mysterious person. And there's tons of them. It's like a whole, adult life's worth of journals, basically.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know, like that's also the dream, to find a box of journals in an attic. And so they sort of go through their seventh grade, the first couple months of their seventh grade year, getting to know each other, getting to know this person through the journals, and kind of discovering, I guess it's a little mystery. Mm-hmm. I was kind of writing these accidental mysteries where I'm like, I don't know how to write a mystery, but I guess this is sort of my offering. And so, yeah, they're just kind of like there's still all the middle grade stuff, like friendships and, crushes and all that.
And divorce.
I know.
In your whole like creative process, and I guess publishing process, like, is there one particular obstacle that keeps popping up or that you have to be most careful about? Like, for example, self-doubt or creative envy or career envy or feelings of scarcity in the business or procrastination in your writing. Like, is there any like particular kind of psychological thing that always wants to drag you down?
I'm like, all of the above, please.
A smorgasbord.
Right. The smorgasbord of insecurity. I would say probably what I struggle with the most, procrastination, yes, but I always get it done. But it's a little scary sometimes. I'm like, this draft is due in 2 weeks. You have to write 80%.
Get cracking.
It's just like, what are you doing? Yeah, like, why did you do this to yourself? But
yeah,
it's worked out. So I don't know. I don't outline, so that's probably part of like.
God, we're so so similar. I know. Well, yes, it's very similar.
Yeah, I don't outline, and I don't know, and I've tried, and it just doesn't work out because then I'm not interested in the story. So it's like I'm doing a lot of writing in my head, but then if you have a deadline, I'm like, well, I've got to get that writing onto the page. So I wrote 2 books last year, and that was I ran into that both times, and I was like, what are you doing? But that always seems to work out. But I would say psychologically what I struggle with the most is that sort of creative and career envy. I have a lot of trouble keeping my eyes on my own paper.
I know what you mean. And then how do you like deal with it? When it comes up, do you have like a way to sort of remind yourself to just get focused on your own work and life? Like, are you able to pull yourself out of it, or do you have to like send petty texts to your friends first? I do all of that, but
okay, good. Yeah, there are tons of petty texts out there. If anyone gets a hold of my phone, it's over. No, yeah, I think just venting to friends really helps, but also recognizing when I am being petty and just saying like, I know this isn't fair. This isn't actually directed at this person or their career, but I'm just having a lot of envy right now. I also give myself a lot of pep talks, like out loud pep talks, which helps. I'll just be like, snap out of it. Like, you're a good writer. And I often go back and look at what I have done. I have a little book cart of all my books that I've written that are just my books. And sometimes I will go over there and look at them and give myself a pep talk and say, hey, look what you've done, you should be proud of this, or go back and look at any accolades I've gotten that I'm particularly proud of. And I don't think anyone should dwell on, just like you shouldn't only look at good reviews of your work because that's unbalanced. I don't think it's good to just be like, look at what I did. I'm great. But
right.
I think it's a good reminder, though, when I am feeling down or feeling like I haven't done anything or like this person's where I want to be, to just go back and remind myself so many people would love to be where you are.
Yeah. And you wanted to be where you are. Right. At one point, you had no idea you would get anything beyond one book or
100%.
And I that's my thing, is just like, yeah, that thing of like 10 years ago, all you wanted was to sell one book and have one book out there with your name on it. And now you have like 7 and more, and it's just like, I've already achieved so much more than I ever thought I could or would. And the drive to want more is a good thing. Like, it's not bad to be ambitious and want to achieve more. But yeah, it's funny how we can get fixated on certain careers and just have all that stuff stirred up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know about you. I kind of like, sometimes this can sound sort of like morbid, but I kind of feel like I live my life like day to day. Like I don't even like to take 2-book deals. I've had like one 2-book deal and I don't think I ever want one again. It just felt like too much pressure. So I feel like I just sort of lived my life like I could die tomorrow, which kind of helps me.
Hey,
well,
you're not wrong.
The pandemic, that has a whole different meaning, right? Everyone's living like that now. But it kind of helps me just like take risks in my writing and just push through that sort of pettiness and that like creative envy and just be like, well, if you're so worried about this, just get it done now. Just do what you can now, I guess.
I've discovered about myself this month also that I realized like I'm similarly, like I'm pretty okay with the fact that I'm mortal, and I'm very aware of we're all going to die. Like we're all going to die is a thing people have been saying the last couple of weeks. Like we're all going to die. I'm like, that's always been true.
Right.
No one wants to die sooner than they expected, but sometimes it does happen. This has taken a dark turn.
Welcome to my world.
But I think that day at a time living is really healthy. Like I do still take 2-book deals because I am very scared of I'm not scared of dying, but I am scared of being broke because I grew up poor. And it's just like, I hate being broke. And if any publisher is offering me money for something that doesn't exist yet, I will say yes.
Sure. Yeah. Give it to me.
But part of that leads me to ask, like, you have a day job or is it like a freelance or the magazine work? Is that a day job or is it like a freelancing situation?
Yeah, I always say I have 4 jobs. So, the writing, the teaching, I do 20 hours a week at, I work from home, so I don't go into an office anymore. But I've been working for 8 years at Backstage magazine. It's a trade magazine for actors. I think it's really only on newsstands in New York and LA. And a lot of it is digital now, but it's like if you talk to any actor who was acting before the 2000s, they'll be like, yeah, I went and picked up a copy of Backstage West to look at all the auditions. And now it's just Backstage, but yeah, it's that magazine. So I'm a copy editor there. So I do about 20 hours a week there part-time, and it's a weekly, so it can get really intense. Just from that.
Yeah, that's a quick cycle.
Yeah, exactly. But I've worked in magazines for a long time, but the copy editing is what I've been doing now for about 8 years with them, which is a really long time. So I do that. And then I also do freelance copy editing for some book publishers.
Oh, great. I hadn't realized that there were authors that do that. And when I was going through copy edits for my 5th book, The Lucy Variations, I discovered that Nova Rensuma was my copy editor.
Yeah.
And she was so good. And it was like amazing to have an author as a copy editor because copy editors can be so literal and pedantic and everything. And so when I had an author, I just felt like we are on the same team, girl.
Yeah, I've heard Nova's.
She was great.
I've heard Nova's amazing. I am not surprised at all. Yeah, she was kind of the first person that I think made me realize, like, wait, I can do that too. I can write books and copy edit. So yeah, I've been doing that for about 7 years, overall book copy editing, and I love it. And sometimes I will get a book I haven't copy edited a close friend's book yet, unless they just like want to request me. But I've worked on some books of people I know, and I'm always like, do I tell them? Like, what if they
I don't know if you're supposed to know, but somehow I found out.
You're not always supposed to know. Some publishers keep it more under wraps than others. But then, of course, I get to a conference or something, and I end up blabbing and being like, I loved your book, and I copy edited it. I hope you liked it. But really only if I felt like I didn't have any, harsh things to say. But yeah, I love being on both sides of the process because I do know what it's like to get copy edited. So I try not to leave any of those super annoying comments, but like that's also part of the job. So I do get very nitpicky. It's just always to make the book better. Like really, that's all.
Every time I get a question from a copy editor, I'm like, well, it has to be asked. Like the answer is still stet, but like it does have to be asked.
Oh yeah.
And so do you have trouble managing your schedule with those 4 different things going on?
I haven't really figured it out. I've been working from home for so many years now, I think almost 5 years, and, juggling all of these jobs for a couple of years now. And I still just feel like I do not have a routine. And I don't know. I mean, do you have a routine for everything you
No.
do?
That's why everything you say, I'm just like, yep. No, and I've been working from home for like 10 years, and it's different all the time. When I get really anxious is when I start feeling like I'm like kind of being mean to myself, and I'm like, ugh, like, why don't you just have a routine? You're so pathetic. Like,
Right.
you're the worst. And then I try and like impose some arbitrary rules on myself, and that'll last like a few days, and I'll tweet about it and be like, I've discovered the secret to my like, well, that worked for 3 days.
Right.
But like you said earlier, like you get it done. I've just sort of accepted like ultimately I get everything done. So whatever I'm doing is like quote unquote working, and maybe I could just leave it alone and just accept like, yeah, it can feel a little chaotic sometimes, but everything gets done, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, maybe because it's just like my writing, with no process. And like maybe my process is just no process. Like I always feel so like ashamed when, I get like a formal interview question and they're just like, well, what's your process? And I'm like, I don't have one. And even when I'm writing, I don't know if you ever feel this way, or I haven't really met anyone else who says like, yeah, I totally know what that's like. But when I'm writing, I feel like I kind of like black out because I don't write every day. And I don't have a schedule. If I'm on a deadline, sure, I'm going to be writing more. But it's like when I sit down, I usually do write for long stretches. And it's not unusual for me to write 3,000 to 5,000 words when I sit down and write. But that's not every day. And I just feel like I don't, like I'll come out of it and be like, well, who wrote that? Like sometimes I read over old work and I'm just like, I don't remember writing that. But I know I did, obviously.
Yeah. I wouldn't describe it as like blacking out in any way, but I definitely, I remember a workshop teacher I had one time had a good way of putting it. And he's like, no one knows what's happening while you're writing. Like, we don't know the mechanism by which you're able to like invent stories. Like, it's to a degree, it's just sort of this miraculous thing that happens that we don't really understand. And in a way, it's not really you, like the you who's walking around speaking rationally and making choices is not the same you where the story is just like flying out of your fingertips and you're not really having conscious thought about it.
Right.
And I definitely agree with that. I mean, I just think I don't know. I can't tell you how. I can tell you how to write. It is like when I go back and read stuff, when it's good, I go, wow, like, I don't remember writing that. When it's bad, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. So it's almost like the sort of disappearing into it is like part of what needs to happen for me to produce good work. And a lot of times in a writing session, it starts out where you're just forcing it and it's bad and you're conscious of every word. But I think the goal is to like slip more into a dream state and not have so much executive function happening in your brain.
Right. And I think that's why outlining doesn't work for me, and neither does writing every day. Like if it's not working, I know you're probably supposed to tell people to just work through it, but for me that doesn't work. I would rather go consume other forms of art or, go take a walk, take a shower, like something to clear my head instead of just sitting there trying to force it on the page.
Yeah, I agree. Good. When we retire together to the Central Coast, we'll
exactly. Yes,
we'll get along great. I should have pre-warned you about this question so you could think about it a little bit, but maybe something will spring to mind. Is there some like piece of art or culture or pop culture that is like giving you life right now or just keeping you going?
Yeah, this will surprise no one. It's not something I'm super proud of, but Real Housewives.
Oh, which one? New Jersey?
All of them. No, not New Jersey, actually. So my main ones are, I just feel like I talk about this on literally every panel and people just stare at me and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I love it. My main favorites are Atlanta and New York and Beverly Hills. And I watch OC. I don't love it. And Potomac is really good now.
Potomac. Yeah. Okay. So We really can live together on the Central
I know,
Coast.
like, what
I mean, I don't know why you're not into New Jersey, but that is my original Housewives obsession was New Jersey, and it's
okay.
still the one that I subscribe to on iTunes because I don't have Bravo, you know.
Same, yeah.
I do love Potomac, and my favorite is Ashley.
Oh my God, Ashley is wild. Her and Michael, I just like almost have to look away. Like,
Well, the
so
two of them,
much.
I can't stand, like the two of them together makes me very uncomfortable. But
Right.
Ashley, she's so smart.
Hmm.
She's so funny and like understands people until she doesn't, which is like probably every reality TV. But it's like you're just going, how are you so smart and so good at perceiving what's going on around you, except for this one giant blind spot?
Right. Yeah, it just doesn't add up. Yeah, she's very like nurturing the way she is with her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm behind. So the last season I saw was season 3. But
I
that
think
was
that's where I am too.
okay.
But
That was an amazing season. They've like definitely found their footing.
what is it about that for you? What is it about the Real Housewives that?
Right. Like people ask, and because I think like it's sort of been reduced to a bunch of, rich white women yelling, which is not untrue.
Mhm.
Um, but really, my friend reminded me that my book Birdie, that it was somewhat inspired by one of the sister relationship on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. One of the sisters is the Kyle and Kim Richards, who were child
Yes,
actors.
they were child
Yeah.
actors.
Yep.
Escape to Witch Mountain.
Oh my God, I know. When I found out that was Kim, I this was like on the floor. I could not believe it. I think I find inspiration because even though, it's a reality show that is somewhat produced in a way that it's like, you're going to hang out today and you should talk about this.
Yes, it's very amped up. Yeah.
Right. But I still think everything, the emotions behind it are real. Like, I don't really think they're acting a lot of the time. And I think a lot of it is real. And it's just what I love. It's just slice of life, just watching people live their lives and seeing how they handle things. And I think it's so human. So yeah, I'm so glad you love Housewives too. And then my latest one I like binged it over, like 4 days and was like completely, I was texting someone, it was like, this is ruining my life. That Love is Blind show on Netflix.
Oh yeah. I've everyone I know has watched it and recommended it. Even my mother like sent me an article saying like, have you watched this? They're recommending it.
Wow.
I'm thinking I'll watch it. I was like, Mom, she's
Oh
83.
my God. I love that.
But I'm resisting. I'm resisting.
You might not like it. I don't like The Bachelor, and I'm really picky about my reality TV, actually, because I'm just a TV junkie. I have been since I was a kid. Like, I was 5 years old when MTV premiered, and I have been obsessed with it since then. But I watched a couple of episodes of The Bachelor and did not like it at all. For me, this was different. It felt really authentic to me, but I have friends who were like, this is not real. But it like kind of opened up something in my heart where I was like, what is happening? Like these strangers like falling in love behind a wall and then having to like live their life. I don't know what happened to me, but it took over my life and like really opened up something that my friends were like, are you okay?
Well, it's on my list. I mean, this staying home unless you have to leave thing.
Yeah.
As
right?
it drags on, I may have to turn to Love is Blind.
Yeah, I would suggest earlier in the pandemic rather than later because it might make you feel like you're going a little cuckoo.
That's a good point.
It's pretty bonkers, like the concept of it, but I also highly recommend it.
We'll have a nice vegetarian friendly, Real Housewives friendly writer commune around Pismo Beach.
I mean, this is going to be amazing. I can't wait.
Well, it's been so great to talk to you. Thank you for.
Thank you.
It's just been good to talk to like someone this week of weird being all alone all the time. Where can people find you online for the rest of the duration?
Right. I actually might be online more now. I kind of lurk on Twitter. I'm there more than people think I am, which I shouldn't say, but I am. So I see everything. So don't try it. No, I'm on Twitter I'm getting punchy now. On Twitter, my handle is at Brandy Colbert, and it is the same handle at Instagram, where I am also, I don't post as much, but I'm on there too.
And your website is just brandycolbert.com. People can find out more about you and your books and your teaching.
Yes, it's all there. Contact info, book info. Yeah, everything is at my website.
Now, I'm looking at your calendar. Are all these events like canceled?
They're all canceled. I know. I was just looking at that too. So I guess I should just cross those out or something to make it clear. Yeah, my whole tour was canceled. So,
well, as someone who has a book coming out in 2 weeks, I feel your pain.
You're gonna be right there with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wish you all the best in just getting through these next few months, and we will stay in touch on all the platforms.
Yes, and thank you so much. I'm so glad the podcast is back, and I'm so flattered that you asked me to be on it.
Oh, thank you. It's great to talk.
You've been listening to This Creative Life with my March 2020 guest, Brandy Colbert. You can check her out at brandycolbert.com, and you can also find out more about me and my books at sarahzar.com. That is Sarah with no H and Zar with 2 R's. And learn how to support the podcast at sarahzar.com/podcast. Thanks to Dave Connis for the theme music.